Let's talk now about the Twitter files. I guess we can call them the Pfizer Files, because this is really at the heart of this latest document dump. Alex Berenson, who, by the way, was banned on Twitter, was put in charge of dissecting and going through all of these files.
Right. There's a beautiful poetic justice about this, because Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is at the center of this round of Twitter files, was actively after Alex Berenson, who is the journalist who published this round. So he gets to kind of hit back at him. It is a bit of a clapback.
Yeah.
And it's fun to watch. For a little bit. I'm going to say it's fun.
Because you get to see someone being such a baby about it, right? You get to see Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is was on the air like every morning. I just saw him the other day, like on MSNBC in the morning. Like he's on Morning Joe. He's on the CNBC talk shows, like every morning pushing Pfizer vaccines.
But acting like we should not have a personal response to what he's doing. So we're going to show you what he's been up to, and whether or not you think it's fair game to have a personal response to him acting in his own self-interest during the rollout of the COVID vaccine. So it has to do again with Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Here is his Twitter account. He is a Pfizer director, former FDA commissioner, and CNBC contributor, and he was actively pressuring Twitter to remove information that might negatively influence public perception of the COVID vaccine. Now, first of all, I don't like this bio. Can we just leave it up for a second? Can we put it back?
Oh, his Twitter bio?
Yeah.
Senior fellow?
Okay. Now, these are a lot of conflicting jobs. We should inherently be suspect of someone who was the FDA commissioner, but now on the board of Pfizer, who is a contributor to a major media outlet. Now, I too was once a CNBC contributor. I worked as more of a reporter than someone who was speaking on behalf of a company or an industry. But when I appeared on air, I was asked to disclose my own investments and conflicts so that they could put it on my own contributor page. So for instance, they asked, do you have stock in any of the companies that you've done your first report in? And I said, well, we have an exchange traded fund with some of these stocks. And they were like, can you get us the perspectives? Because we want to fully disclose to viewers whether or not I have a conflict. So if I was, let's say, covering an Apple conference and you sought out my name, you could see that maybe we had some Apple stock at the time or something like that. I wasn't an active trader. I wasn't speaking on behalf of Apple in order to influence my stock. But I had to disclose that it was in a fund, like a 401k-based fund. CNBC doesn't seem to be that to really care that much about disclosing for Scott Gottlieb, though. Dr. Gottlieb is currently on Pfizer's board. Here's his page on Twitter's website saying so.
This is Pfizer's website. This
is Pfizer's website saying that he is currently on the board. I don't know why we need to know his age as 50, but okay. And CNBC, when they're supering him, which what we call in the business is like, how do we write his title at the bottom of the screen? Or how do we attribute him? Well, look at just the most recent pieces he's done. They're calling him former FDA commissioner and CNBC contributor. They are not mentioning that he is on the board of Pfizer, therefore speaking with a conflict.
No, they never put him in.
Sometimes the anchors will throw to him that way. Go ahead.
They're not disclosing that he's not just a board member. He's like an executive board member. So it's like he's like one of the top board members. It's not just a regular board member position.
Yeah. Now, sometimes you can see the anchors will throw to him that way, and but most of the time they're just like, Scott Gottlieb is back. Scott, what about blah, blah, blah. And so they don't bother to disclose to you that he is on the board of Pfizer, which I think is really important as we're talking about issues such as the biopharmaceutical complex. But at least on his contributor page, it does say that he serves on the board of Pfizer, so they can sort of CYA. If you know that acronym, it's not an acronym, it's an initialism. If you know that initialism, they can cover their a-hole. And so, now at least we know who we're dealing with and how he has special privileges with the media. So what did he do? Well, according to these Twitter files, Dr. Gottlieb wrote to Twitter asking them to censor information about natural immunity. Here's the email, and you can see at the bottom the tweet that we're dealing with. It's from Dr. Brett Scherer. He tweeted that it's clear now that natural immunity is superior by a lot And that he's saying that there is no scientific justification for taking this if you have had a previous infection. I'm paraphrasing just because I want to play by the rules of engagement here. Now, Dr. Gottlieb writes to Todd Boyle. We're going to talk about who Todd Boyle is in a second, and says this is corrosive. Here he drops a sweeping conclusion off a single retrospective study in Israel that hasn't been peer reviewed. But this tweet will end up going viral and driving news coverage. Heaven forbid we should have a discussion about a scientific paper and that it should go viral because it will hurt him and his company and his bottom line. Now, do we know? Let's circle back around to this recipient of said email, Todd Boyle. Who is this? Well, listen to Berenstein himself tell Tucker.
Berenson.
I'm sorry, I'm saying it like the Berenstein Bears.
Berenson. Yeah.
He is not one of the Berenstein Bears. He's a person named Berenson. Listen to him tell Tucker Carlson exactly who this character, Todd O'Boyle, is.
What's also so striking about that is that when Gottlieb had a problem, he went to a guy named Todd O'Boyle. Todd O'Boyle is a lobbyist, a senior lobbyist in Twitter's Washington office, and he is the guy the White House turned to first when they wanted to censor at Twitter. So we have evidence of, let's say, overlap between Pfizer and the White House as they tried to push vaccines, as they tried to discourage vaccine hesitancy, and as they tried to suppress debate around the vaccines.
Okay, wow. So this all comes full circle because you probably have noticed that we're not talking about a Twitter Files about government intervention, but they are very chummy. There is a Venn diagram, if you will, right, of a cast of characters. Now, the very next week after this, let's not let them talk about natural immunity. And Twitter actually did flag that tweet with a misleading tag. Berenson doesn't say how this happened because that original tweet is still up there with a misinformation tag. And he does say that Twitter internally didn't find any problem with that tweet. So we're not sure how the misleading tag got there, why it's still there. That's a hole. And then the following week, Gottlieb flagged another tweet about the low mortality rate in children. And not ironically, the Pfizer vaccine was approved for children shortly after. And he even told Twitter, we have the vaccine coming out. We can't have this where people are saying that this is not worth the risk for children. Twitter didn't do anything about that request, but it doesn't change the fact that he was super comfortable making it with Twitter.
Oh, and he also on CNBC, not just even Twitter, but on CNBC and MSNBC, I watched him multiple times talk about children getting the vaccine. And he was asked specifically about, from Becky and others on CNBC, what about our children? How should, and, oh, yes, it's safe and effective and there should no problems at all.
Yeah.
And we're going to, yeah.
Well, we already have the information about Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, making extreme statements about the risk to children. He now is facing an investigation in the UK for that very thing. But this is now someone else on the board of Pfizer doing the exact same thing and having a large pulpit to speak from because the media gives it to him with no qualms whatsoever and I don't see a single anchor pushing back on him and saying, well, thank you for telling us what you think of the vaccine, but we have to point out that you have a conflict because you'll make money from it.
Right.
Who else should we talk to?
I mean, Pfizer's paying him over $370,000. Pfizer is paying him
annually
$370,000. How can you have a guy who goes on television then and tells people, can give people advice about the very vaccine that he's going to make money off of?
Right.
It's the same conflict of interest that, the members of Congress can be, investing in these companies while at the same time being in committees that are directly involved in, shaping these companies.
Yeah. Now, in response to this Twitter Files dump, Dr. Gottlieb has gone full on whiny baby. Here is his response. I can't show you all of it because some of it I think would be containing hate speech, but I am going to show you his Twitter handle and you could seek it out himself. Basically, his response is you shouldn't be picking on me personally. So let's just read it and dissect it, and maybe that's your read or maybe it's not. In the past, he says, I've raised concerns with Twitter related to the safety of me and others and threats being made on the platform. This included direct as well as specific threats. Sometimes it included statements